Right, good evening. Thanks for clicking on to Vogan's European Outlook for Thursday, the 3rd of November. I'm sitting in the conservatory here. Sorry, it's a wee bit echoey, but look at this here. Beautiful evening sky looking out to the west from the house here in Eventon in Rossshire. Hope everybody is enjoying their late afternoon stroke evening. Looks as if we're going to have a frost here this evening across many portions of central and eastern British Isles ahead of a frontal system moving in from the Atlantic. Clear skies, light winds, and I would expect to see a frost in the car early tomorrow morning. But of course, that nice, clear, fresh, crisp air will get quickly removed by more wind and rain. We're really starting to kind of mount rain totals up actually in many portions of the UK, and for quite some time, while many parts of central northern England, up in Scotland, Northern Ireland, seeing plenty of rain in the last 4 to 6 weeks roughly. The south east in particular, which was hardest hit during the summertime with lack of rainfall. Recently the rains just weren't quite substantial compared to what we'd seen further north, but we're starting to see a change taking place here, almost a little bit now mentioned, in BBC and Met Office broadcasts of a little bit of issue with flooding. So we are starting to see even that dry area, the southeast of England, northern parts of France as well, seeing that rain deficit starting to kind of get eaten away. And of course, we've got a lot of high pressure still maintaining itself over Europe, and I think that's a direct consequence of the lack of rainfall during the summertime, drying out the soils. And now we're seeing that kind of summer hangover, if you will, into the middle and even now latter stages of autumn overall. But we're seeing a significant amount of rainfall now starting to focus over the British Isles and indeed Ireland, and it's going to be interesting to watch this pattern that we've got now taking place. What does that potentially lead to later down the road? And that is something I'm big on. I made mention about a potential big flip in the rainfall pattern, in particular from summer, and even back during the early portions of this year, we had a tremendous lack of rainfall for quite some time now. You're talking a few years now where there's been a rainfall deficit, if you will, across the British Isles. But I think we're going to start to see in the next 6 to 12 months, possibly longer than that, a wetter period coming up overall for the UK, because I think La Nina is going to eventually start to break apart. We're going to start to see, instead of having that cold area from the eastern equatorial Pacific towards the dateline, I think we're going to start to see the gradual removal of that cold, possibly turning warm, and especially during the springtime. So of course this is going forward a long way out, I know, but I wouldn't be surprised if we had a fairly significant wet summer in 2023 if we start to get hints of an El Nino developing, and we are now due the development of an El Nino, and I think summer rainfall will come back to being substantially above normal, I think. So whether this change that we're now seeing is maybe a harbinger of things to come later down the road, again, I have to emphasize, I could be wrong. This is just my thoughts, my interpretation of I think what's going on. Julian oscillation is rotating into phases 7, 8, and then the overall wave will weaken, I think. You can see here off the model, if you look at the area of substance at the moment here over Europe, Africa, western portion of the Indian Ocean, we're seeing these greens showing up over the parts of the Pacific. Now we've got the widespread sinking. Now this, folks, is back to Monday the 31st of October, and I want to show you the progression eastwards of this pulse. Notice particularly here over Central America, or the junction between South America and North America. Notice this bullseye of sinking air. As I play through this sequence, we see the significant turnaround to upward motion. So increased convection, increased showers, thunderstorms, and tropical development. And we've seen that taking place here. If I can try and find the right tweet quick enough, I'll try and show you what I'm talking about here. But it's very, very interesting to see the turnaround taking place with the tropics now becoming more active, with the Mann-Julian oscillation rotating into a favourable phase for the development of late season tropical systems here. Let's have a very quick look here. We'll have a look at Marco Patagna's tweets because this is very interesting stuff. So, of course, with the Mann-Julian oscillation becoming more favourable for late season tropical development in the Atlantic, we've got Hurricane Lisa that moved ashore in Belize as an 85 mile per hour hurricane. We've got Hurricane Martin as well that developed here. Why so far north? You only have to look at the sea surface temperature profile to realise we've got the warmest waters compared to normal up over the mid to high latitudes of the Atlantic basin here. Notice here a little bit of cooling starting to show up. We've got, of course, the cooling over the Azores, representative of the pattern that we've had in the last week to 2 week period. Of course, blocking area of high pressure over Europe. We had a strong jet stream systems coming down out of Greenland. With the resistance of that high over Europe, it forces a trough to the west over the Azore region. Development of low pressure systems then moved northeast around this area of high pressure. This area of high pressure, by the way, is something I'm going to pay close attention to because we've got a scenario at the moment. We've got an active, strong jet stream crossing the Atlantic. One system after another is moving towards the British Isles, so plenty of wind, plenty of rain to speak about. If we look at the overview chart here, you can see, and I'm kind of jumping back and forward, and I do apologise about that. Ideas come into my head, I want to talk about it, but I've got this plan in my head of what I want to show you, and then I get carried away with something that I see or an idea comes into my head as I'm talking about it, and I kind of lose my place, so to speak. But this here is Martin, the remnants of Hurricane Martin. I can't remember whether it's still a hurricane or not. But of course, as a transition from tropical to extratropical, it then, it's drawn warm tropical air north. It's coming up against the resistance of colder air trying to come in. And of course, as that system circulation ingests both tropical air as well as cold polar air coming in on the backside, then you get the rapid deepening of this system. The system drops to 926 millibars to the south of Greenland here. This is a big player, folks. This could change the dynamics in the upper air pattern over the Atlantic, Europe, even up towards the Arctic region. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see what takes place. This is very similar, only further east, to Hurricane Fiona. Remember back in September, we had the Mann-Julian oscillation going through phase 6 into 7, and therefore we almost have a repeat. We've almost got a repeat of September now, only in the early portion of November. The big difference is, remember what happened when we seen the Mann-Julian oscillation becoming more favourable in the Atlantic. What took place is we started to see systems developing within the tropics, lifting north. We had high pressure building towards the north, and we have had a negative North Atlantic oscillation during the month of September. Skip forward several weeks, 5-6 weeks. Now we're in a position that we could start to see wintry weather developing even here in the British Isles. This is a pattern I'm saying could happen. I'm saying it doesn't necessarily mean it has to happen, though. And I want to emphasize that I am not beating the drum of cold and winter coming in the next couple of weeks. I'm saying that this is the evolution of the pattern that I'm seeing. The Mann-Julian oscillation, the tropics, all acting similar, if not very similar, to what we've seen back in September. So this is a repeat pattern, and that's something I highlighted back in September, that what takes place during this month could then repeat itself 5, 6, 7 weeks further down the road. And of course, further down the road that is now getting into the time frame where we need to pay attention. But at the moment, we've still got this area of high pressure resisting over Europe, deflecting systems somewhat to the northwest of the British Isles generally. So there's that area of low pressure. It's coming up against a block over Greenland. It then kind of gradually starts to weaken, but it kind of then pivots its way towards the British Isles here with other systems around it. Then another system kind of almost dissipates, almost just off the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, if you notice. Then we've got another system, active frontal system, wind, rain, and that moves through. It's followed by blustery showers. Temperatures in recent days have came back down close to average, if you've noticed here. But then as we press through towards the middle portion of the month, those systems then start to kind of get deflected a little bit more west and north of the British Isles. Area of high pressure again rebuilds over Europe, if you notice that, and then it's kind of shielding us from any kind of weather. So we do have a spell during the middle portion of the month where high pressure and drier conditions does start to take hold. But it's interesting, all the while we've got more troughiness starting to show up over Scandinavia. And the question is, does the Mann-Julian Oscillation and Martin's influence start affecting the pattern up towards the Arctic region here? Now, this is off the CFSV2. What I believe could be happening, and you have to emphasize that word could. I think what's going to happen is we're going to get this bombardment that we're in at the moment of low pressure affecting the British Isles, high pressure over Europe. But notice this strongest positive compared to normal is now pretty far north in the north shore of Scandinavia here. We've got this big strong positive over eastern North America, the other positive over the North Pacific. So these positives, this three-prong area of high pressure is worth paying attention to, because if you notice here, we skip forward to the following week, that area of high pressure continues to build north. We've still got this high over Alaska. We've got a little bit of suppression in that ridge on the east coast of North America. But then as we go from the middle to second half of November, notice here that we're starting to see the continuation of height rises within the high latitude region here. So these areas of high pressure are kind of almost starting to join forces. Period between the 17th and the 24th of November here. This could be a direct consequence of that phase 7 into 8 of the Mann-Julian Oscillation, Martin's influence pushing northwards towards Greenland, and this is all a downstream response within the atmosphere. And therefore, with this orientation of high pressure over the high latitudes, lower pressure further south, could mean something a little bit more in the way of wintry towards the end of, let's say, the final 10 days of November, I think is worth paying close attention to. Now, the North Atlantic Oscillation at this moment in time, generally speaking, is still in a kind of positive flatline scenario. So this dotted line is the kind of average of the runs. Notice here there's a couple of interesting outliers. Now, there is a few that go strongly positive, but there is a few here, notice these two in particular, that nosedive towards the end of the month. That's interesting to see. The Arctic Oscillation, similar. We've got a few members of the model here now starting to take quite a significant dive into negative. Is it possible that it's seeing the Mann-Julian Oscillation and the progression north of blocking? So worth keeping a close eye on, I think. Certainly over the next week or so, we're still going to see more rain, and we are laying down that heavy rainfall. Does the trough go to where that heavy rainfall is happening now? That's going to be the question. So, yeah, we'll continue to watch this evolution, development. It may not happen, and we go through the month of November with nothing, or we get something that materializes. Worth paying attention to. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you again hopefully tomorrow with more. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye for now.